Good afternoon, it's Tuesday the 17th of October 2017, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host Brian Gerrish, with me in the studio Mike Robinson. We're also joined today by David Ellis from Strategic Defence Initiatives. And Mike, I think this is one of the most important UK Column News episodes that we have done to date, because matters with regard to our constitution and the military, I think we're at the crisis point.
Well, as we suggested yesterday, it is a done deal. Here is Theresa May and Mr. Juncker. Well, there they go, walking out. Now, I don't know where he's handed it up. Maybe he's been taking lessons from Harvey Weinstein or something. I'm not sure. But the following joint statement was issued by Theresa May and by Juncker following their working dinner, as we mentioned yesterday. And they said the Prime Minister and the President of the European Commission had a broad constructive exchange on current European and global challenges. They discussed a common interest in preserving the Iran nuclear deal and work on strengthening the security of citizens in Europe, notably on the fight against terrorism. And they also prepared for the European Council, which will take place later in the week. Well, she also found time to, in her hectic schedule, to speak to the French President, Macron. They were speaking about the strong UK-France relationship. And of course, at the heart of that strong UK-France relationship is the bilateral defence agreement signed at Lancaster House. And they agreed to continue building on that partnership in a range of areas. And she also spoke to the Irish Taoiseach, Varadkar. So now let's keep in mind that everything that Theresa May has said since her recent, Lancaster House speech on Brexit was that she's not aiming for separation from the European Union, but a new partnership with the EU of greater depth and breadth than we've ever had before. And for those that didn't see yesterday's programme, this is what we're talking about, jump-starting a new era in defence. Now, at that meeting, Theresa May was meeting not just Jean-Claude Juncker, but also Mr. Barnier, who's the head of the Brexit negotiations for the European Commission. Mr. Barnier was responsible for this document, In Defence of Europe. The subhead, as they say, is Jump-starting a New Era in Defence. And if you remember, this is the quote. Europe needs to move from the current patchwork of bilateral and multilateral military cooperation to gradually increase defence integration. The permanent structured cooperation, PESCO, provided in the Lisbon Treaty, could become a game changer in European security by enabling willing members to move forward. And as we mentioned, this has been promoted and discussed, particularly by Mrs. Mogherini, the Foreign Affairs spokesperson for the European Union. Now, for anybody that hasn't seen our work on EU military unification on the UK Column website, please do go and have a look at it. There's a timeline describing what has happened from about 1984 forwards. We could have gone back further than that, but that seemed like a reasonable stepping off point. And all the main events over the years are there. Look at it, and most importantly, share it. Please share it among as many people as possible. Now, once we get to 2017, we start to see things moving a bit faster. The Council reviewing progress and agreeing to support military missions and combined military missions and so on. But when we get to June, the European Council was calling for the launch of the permanent structured cooperation. And then this meeting, this European Council meeting that the statement from Theresa May mentioned is taking place on Thursday and Friday this week. And again, PESCO on the agenda. So here is the European Council meeting, 19th, 20th of October. And this is what they say. Heads of state or government will resume discussions on permanent structured cooperation on defence. At the June European Council, leaders agreed on the need to launch PESCO. And this is the draft agenda. And what amuses me about this, Brian, is there is the agenda item. So every other agenda item on here, which includes migration and digital Europe and external relations, all comes with a little bit of summary text to explain what it is. Defence, it just says PESCO, that's it.
Yeah,
There's no comment.
Yeah, and all of this happening, Mike, whilst the public are simply told, oh, well, there's some difficulty in the Brexit negotiations. We're not really sure how it's going to pan out. It's all very, very difficult. That's what's pushed out to the public. Behind the scenes, they are simply working flat out for this massive military integration.
Well, I would go further. Everything that's in the press is just about generating as much noise as possible to keep journalists happy, keep them churning out rubbish while all this stuff's going on in the background. And look, one of the things that David Ellis has been saying from the beginning is that alongside Defence Union comes Banking Union, a Treasury, and only a week or so ago, Juncker's European Commission released this release, which describes completing the banking union. And David, let's bring you in at this point. As I said yesterday, Brexit is being used to drive all this. It's really about a new relationship with, as Theresa May says, with greater breadth and depth than we've ever seen. Brexit isn't about taking us out of the European Union. It's about driving this other agenda.
Yeah, absolutely right, Mike. Thanks for bringing us on today, and I've got to say, great work for what you did yesterday. That's exactly the case. So this is the only deal in town. This is the main event, and all other things that are being sort of beaten around in the press are just a sideshow. This is being agreed. It's being agreed at full throttle by our government, and what Juncker and Barnier are clearly doing is dictating to Theresa May and the government as to what's going to happen. You will tie up this bilateral patchwork that's effectively now a stepping stone into full Schengen military free zone, military free movement of military in the Schengen zone. And that will go hand in glove with the money and the capital budgets, operational budgets. It'll go hand in glove with the treasury because they'll need a treasury to administer it. Once they've got a treasury, they will then tax. So we will submit our military into this for free and get a tax bill. We are not leaving the EU. We are now further into the EU, a reinvigorated EU, much as the Jacques Delors pitch to Maggie Thatcher at Fontainebleau in 1984. I've got an idea. Well, he hadn't. He was just doing as he was told. The idea was we want currency union, we want military union, and loss of your veto, please, Mrs. Thatcher. And she said, no, no, no. But we're now seeing it come round again. And May is actually doing it this time. She's doing it for real because they've all had the key meeting and it looks like they're all in favour of it. So this is the only deal in town. Brexit's a complete load of nonsense. And this is clearly definitive now. This is a permanent military structure that they will go forward from. So there's no challenging. There's nobody saying, whoa, stop, this isn't a good idea. Have you evaluated it? It's not gone through Parliament. There's been no scrutiny. There's been no debate. And more importantly, when is someone going to say something to the effect of, where's the royal assent for this? By what means do you, as First Lord of the Treasury, Mrs. May, submit our military without any mandate from the people, other than you could obviously, they're going to say, well, we signed Lisbon, so we're committed to that, so it's okay. That's my get out of jail free card, thank you. But they're going to do this. There's no mandate for it. It's never been anybody's election campaign ever.
David, sorry to interject, David. This is an absolutely key point. No debate in Westminster about these decisions at all. Pre-debate, absolutely nothing. We've now got a cabal of people. My mind is drawn back to the Queen being in Parliament without her crown. And at the time, Mike in particular said this is very significant. The Queen was there in her blue EU hat, inverted commas. We said this is an unconstitutional parliament. We have now simply got a cabal of Conservative MPs making decisions about anything they like, constitutional issues, defence. This is a criminal cabal now running Britain. And somebody has just said in our chat box, what this actually means is we're a whisker away from the fact that foreign troops can simply be brought in on British soil as part of this new so-called agreement. This is immensely dangerous stuff.
Yeah. I mean, look, everybody's going on about sort of immigration and whatnot, and I've already articulated that's not the issue here of people coming to this country. The issues were far greater than that. But a lot of people have used it as political whipping to get votes and so forth. But that being so, imagine what you are going to say and what you are going to find when foreign troops have free reign in this country, that are in this military union, permanent military union system, PESCO, that they're talking about here. You could have a conglomerate, because I was asked the other week by an ex-senior officer saying, well, how do you envisage this working? I said, well, what they'll do is they'll put 25 Royal Marines in a group with 25 Dutch and 25 German and 25 French, and they'll all have to get along, and pretty soon they'll all be in the same uniform. The national uniforms will go at a threshold point, and the orders will come from Brussels. Right, you lot go there. Who will say no? Who in charge of those 100 EU mixed military troops once they've been stitched together in this patchwork? Because that's what's going to happen. Which officer in there, which captain is going to say no? I'm not doing that. I'm not going there, and I'm not doing what you're ordering me to do. Because this is going to be the watershed problem. If people are prevaricating about a lot of people coming in as economic or social migrants into this country, imagine what you're going to have when you have foreign troops in an amalgamated EU military union force, and foreign aircraft and foreign tanks coming and going as they please with free movement, as a free movement of like we've had with free movement of trade, free movement of people, free movement of money. We're going to have free movement of military now. So this is it. This is the margin call. So Barnier is a co-author of this. He's a co-EU author stroke agent. But this language I've seen before in the research that we've done. This is the language that was used in the BIS during World War II. We're going to kickstart the American economy with lease lend, and that was a Thomas McKittrick concept and policy that was then pushed through. It wasn't Churchill's at all. It was nothing to do with the American government. It was derived from the BIS. And this is the same language. We're going to kickstart the EU with this, and they're going to kickstart it with a load of money, because as we know, that NATO doesn't have a bank, but the EU has a bank, and it's going to finance this very, very quickly. There's going to be a load of accounts created in order to manage it within their treasury and within their bank, and they're going to quantitative ease a vast amount of money in order to make this happen. They have to, because if they don't, the euro will fail. If they don't get their military union, the euro will default. That's the danger.
Well,
so this is the underpinning mechanism for them to precipitate the euro. But where are politicians? Absolutely silent.
Well, David, let me just bring in the quote from this press release from the European Commission, as indicated by President Juncker in his State of the Union address on the 13th of September 2017. The banking union must be completed if it's to deliver its full potential as part of a strong economic and monetary union and complementary to the capital markets union. It couldn't be clearer that what we're moving towards is full federal union within the European Union, including, as you have said from the beginning, military union, banking union, and a foreign policy.
Yeah, it all goes hand in glove. It all has to close loop in order for the money to flow around and for them to set a single point budget. So if there was anything that everyone, let's say on our side of the fence, if you're listening to this, if you're a non-believer in this and you're a Brexiteer, this is the one and only thing that we all need to focus on now in order to get this stopped. If we don't stop this, there is absolutely no hope of doing anything sensible in this Brexit period that we're in. And clearly, Mrs. May, and I was warned of this, quite some time ago, her tactic was to offer the military in order to get the trade deal. Now, you can evaluate yourself what you feel about that, whether you think it's a good, bad, or you're indifferent to it. But nonetheless, my opinion is she's being absolutely duped. She's either duped or she's inept. She can't have both. But by any stretch of the imagination, we've not seen anything like this in this country. We're effectively going to roll the clock back to something around sort of 2,000 years ago, where we were under the Roman Empire, where they had common military across the zone and a common treasury as well under Caesar Augustus and Mark Antony. It's exactly the same model.
Okay.
I've just got to ask my normal question. You're out and about, you're meeting and able to talk with a lot of senior people, some politicians, some retired senior officers. I watch that field with fascination as there is total silence. It seems to me many of these people, they are rabbits in the headlights now, or they can't grasp the seriousness of what's happening. Are you seeing any glimmer of awakening amongst the senior retired military officers?
Brian, Mike, all the UK viewers, I would love to answer that as yes, but no. No, I don't see enough of an awakening. I don't see enough of really attaching the right amount of regard to this because of just how important it is. Without a military, we're not a nation, and we're certainly not a nation without any kind of autonomy over our industry where we can make things and sell and get on so we can all have nice lives. So, this is really the key thing here to what's happening to this country right here and now. And it's just simply not good enough for certain people to say, oh, well, what's going on the UK column, it's no good because people are picking up the phones and talking to their MPs and they don't know anything about it. Well, no, that's not the case. That's exactly what people have got to do, and they've got to do it more quickly because our MPs have just not been doing their jobs. The very fact that they're naive and haven't been looking at this and assessed it just tells you just how bad things are in Parliament. The only instrument that we've got in this country to deal with this, it's been circumvented to such a degree that the MPs, and I can concur with this because I've done a lot of it, is that they, in the previous years, have just not wanted to know. Yeah. Please go away. That's not important. I've even been told this morning by a Lord's PA, oh, well, military union, that's not important. That can just go in the trash bin with all the other charity applications that we get. So hang on a minute. How much money is involved with this? You're saying our military isn't important? Mm. This is a nonsense. And this is a current industrial Lord's PA telling me this morning that it's not important.
David, this is arrogance, ignorance and treason in various proportions, depending on who you're speaking to. Let's come into the military from a different angle. This is something that I've been warning about for many years. We're now seeing the effects of it. And I've got a Mail headline. This is from a few days ago. And the headline is pictured, woman officer accused of having sex on board a nuclear-armed submarine is identified as naval comrades threaten to resign. So the story here is this is one of UK's nuclear deterrent submarines, HMS Valiant, and sex on board, not just with anybody. This is the commanding officer, a gentleman called Stuart Armstrong, involved. The second in command has also been removed from the ship. And what does this represent? Well, if we come in and have a look at what the Royal Navy has said, this is their media team. According to the Royal Navy, the incident had not affected submarine operations. Now, I find this statement, I could say it's spin, but I actually think that this statement is just disgraceful because this is the Royal Navy trying to pull the wool over the eyes of the general public as to what the real situation is. Let's go through some of the stuff. We've got a nuclear deterrent submarine where morale and discipline had completely broken down on board. If you have the commanding officer and the second in command involved in an incident like this, and you have 5 officers who had to threaten to resign unless something was done, this is a major collapse of morale and discipline on board that submarine. So not affected, it did not affect submarine operations. Who does the Royal Navy media team think the public are? Do they think we're idiots? This is mind-blowing, Mike. We've got the captain, the second in command, are actually removed from the ship. That means that 2 new officers have to be flown in with all the cost, the time and money inconvenience. And the point is that when those 2 new officers get on board the ship, they have got to learn to work with the team that still exists on the ship. It's going to take them quite some time to bed in, learn the names, learn the people, learn who the good people are, who the people they've got to watch. So for the Royal Navy to simply try and brush this under the carpet, saying, oh, this is a minor incident, this is very, very dangerous stuff. But of course, this is social policy, which has now been brought into the Royal Navy. I'm going to give another example here. And if there's any ladies out there who think that I'm attacking the women in this case, that's absolutely not the case. What I'm doing is saying that we have an agenda which has been forced on the military, and we're now paying the price. So now we've got the roles reversed because we've got a female commander of a ship. She was removed for having an affair, a love affair as it's described, on board with a junior officer. This is how the Telegraph dealt with that. Shock horror, UK's first female warship commander accused of acting just like her male peers. So in this article, the whole incident is spun that what's good for the goose is good for the gander, totally ignoring the points that I've raised, that when these incidents happen, they represent an absolute major breakdown in discipline and morale on board the ships, and that affects the operational efficiency. Who wrote the article for the Telegraph? Dr. Brooks Magnanti, apart from her previous expertise as a call girl, she's also a forensic scientist, apparently.
So lots of defence experience.
Lots of defence experience. So the Telegraph, supposedly one of the upstanding British newspapers, would have this lady tell us what should be happening in the military. And before I ask David to comment on this, I'd just like to bring in this fantastic book. I've mentioned it several times over the years, The European Union Collective Enemy of Its Member States by Christopher Story. And in it is this template which is talking about how Western societies will be subverted. The information came from a man called Thomas Schumann. He was actually a defector from the KGB. But if we have a look at this one area, it says it all, because in security, what is to be done, the methods employed, penetration and demoralization of intelligence community, police, military, brackets homosexuality, women in the military, collectivism of military power and security. And what were the results on the right-hand side? Degradation of intelligence quality, military power and recruitment pool is effectively damaged, defensiveness, total unawareness of strategy, idolatry of cooperation, inability to act decisively and alone. And I think since that table was produced sometime prior to 1985, the original one goes back to 1970, this is an uncanny prediction of the damage that this new policy would have on the military. And of course, what this gentleman was warning the West about was that there were interests that were going to destroy society and particularly target the military. We're watching this in front of our eyes. David, this is not as simple as pointing a finger and saying this man is KGB, so this policy is coming in from Russia, because we know perfectly well that this social policy is being driven in by the world banking system.
Well, it's certainly being driven, and you know that you follow the money, you find policy, and then you find policy makers. So, I mean, let's go back to this to the matter at hand here. This is Her Majesty's atomic submarine in the Royal Navy. This is not a pub where people cavort. So that's the first thing everybody's got to bear in mind. This is not a public house where you just get a crush on the barmaid and you think, well, we'll have a go. This is an atomic submarine with nuclear weapons on board that does a vital job, where there are hundreds of people's lives at stake in the submarine and around it. So my understanding of this from one or two senior submariners that I know is that first and foremost, this is a silent service. Absolutely silent, and it isn't, because this is breached into the media. So that's nice, isn't it? So what I'm going to qualify this as brand destruction.
Oh.
This is brand destruction of the Royal Navy, brand destruction of Her Majesty's Armed Services. And when you clump that all together with all the people that are being arrested and had up on charges for doing their job as the state has asked them to in the past. Who does this serve? And we're seeing a new military being formed in front of us, and I would submit that it serves that cause, not the course that you and I are aware of, Brian. Yeah. But I've got to come back to one thing with this, and I'm going to close loop it with what your opening gambit was. I was told by a trident responsible admiral that there was a pact that was known about within the Treasury that runs and manages, and Her Majesty's Treasury, I'm not on about the EU Treasury that's just about to come, that operates and manages and distributes this money to the armed services. There was a pact between Conservative and Labour not to criticise each other over defence cuts because they were both doing it. And who does that suit now? These people are all so inept. Look how it suits. Oh, well, we're so weak and feeble now. We've got all these gaps. What we'll do is we're going to military union, and that'll all be lovey-dovey, won't it? And that'll all be perfect because there won't be any gaps. What a terrific idea. And it'll be cheaper. Look how much money we're going to save. It'll be wonderful. It'll be jammed tomorrow. Look at all this stuff we're going to make. Not. We're at the watershed thing here now. How convenient. They pull a story out the hat like this, where you've got a commander of a nuclear submarine having an affair whilst he's on duty. Yeah. This is unprecedented, Brian. Unprecedented.
It's outrageous. And of course, as you've said, nuclear submarines, particularly dangerous vehicles. A warship is one thing, submarine totally different, because somebody makes a mistake, people die. That's the nature of nuclear submarines. But let's have a look at where this policy has been coming from. We'll bring in our old friend Common Purpose. If you go to cpexposed.com website, you can call up some of the documents that we posted many years ago warning of the fact that this pernicious political charity was now training British military in all sorts of things, leadership, how to behave, how to conduct themselves. Have a look at some of these documents here. And then today, thank you very much to the person who pointed out to me that Common Purpose was busy tweeting, that it was doing great work to create future leaders in partnership with the American Express Leadership Academy. Well, how fantastic that we've got a so-called charity training British military that boasts, of course, with its deep relationship with big money, American Express here. But previously, of course, Common Purpose was created by banks. But Julia Middleton, the chief executive, would never reveal which banks. We certainly think Deutsche Bank was a big one, but she would never say. So what is this training about? Well, Common Purpose and American Express are targeting not-for-profit organisations across the world. And it links through to another organisation here called Centre for Creative Leadership, where they're boasting of the tens of thousands of people in the not-for-profit sector that they're now training worldwide. And of course, if you look at the leadership development they're using, this is inevitably based on neuro-linguistic programming. This is very, very dangerous stuff.
Right, let's just quickly mention Yemen. Well, we've been over in Saudi Arabia, apparently. This is Minister for the Middle East, Alistair Burt, who's visiting Riyadh yesterday for bilateral meetings. This is 17th, that's Sunday. Sunday he was over there meeting for bilateral meetings with the governments of Saudi Arabia and Yemen. Of course, he's not meeting with the government of Yemen, because who he's meeting with is the so-called President Hadi, who is not really the president of Yemen, and it's not really the Yemeni government. This is the faction of President Hadi, of course, overstayed his welcome in Yemen, ran off to Saudi Arabia whenever he wasn't wanted anymore, and that was the start of the Saudi bombings in Yemen. So speaking after his visit to Riyadh, Burt said that Saudi Arabia is one of our strongest regional allies, and we continue to work closely together on a wide range of important areas. We support the delivery of Saudi Arabia's ambitious reform program, Vision 2030, and we need to resolve the ongoing dispute with Qatar. Central to all of my meetings was the ongoing conflict in Yemen. I made clear my concern that the conflict was now contributing to the largest humanitarian crisis in the world. Well, there you go. But in the meantime, as this news outlet is reporting, London calls on UN to avoid misleading information on Yemen. And I just thought this was a fascinating little insight into the discussions that Bert was having in Saudi Arabia, because he's particularly concerned that the United Nations is getting information from all kinds of people, and that some of that information might be misleading information. In other words, the UN is perhaps not just entirely listening to the British-Saudi rhetoric and British-Saudi narrative on this. They might be getting information that we don't really agree with, like the fact that Hadi isn't really the president of this country and shouldn't really be the president of this country, and that, you know, maybe some people are saying that Saudi shouldn't be bombing Yemen in the way that it is. So he feels that really the United Nations needs to be particularly careful to only listen to the right voices.
The right voices, and I note the flag there is edged in gold braid. Perhaps we pop that one back. So this is significant because this is a man representing, I think, Admiralty law. So is he representing the City of London as opposed to UK?
Good question.
Yeah.
But certainly not a question we'll see asked in the media, which is why they need to be on trial. From Stop Wars event taking place on Thursday. Get along to that. Details on Eventbrite and tickets on Eventbrite. Tickets going very, very fast now. Only a few left, so get yours if you can. And just a reminder that tomorrow, UK column meeting in the George in Plympton begins at 7:30. Get along to that if you can as well. Now, we have a new mergers and acquisitions regime in this country, you'll be pleased to know, Brian, particularly with regard to the defence industry. Because the UK is going to tighten foreign investment rules with regard to manufacturers of military products on what they describe as security concerns. So they're saying that they're going to try to make it harder for foreign buyers of small companies that design and manufacture military products and other key technologies. They've delayed plans to change the takeover regime for sensitive industries such as civil nuclear, though. This only applies to military. And Greg Clark, here he is, he said no part of the economy is off limits to foreign investment, and the UK will continue to be a vociferous advocate for free trade and a magnet for global talent. So I'm not clear exactly what this is. I suspect that they are saying that they want to have a say in mergers and acquisitions for companies as small as, you know, in terms of the defence industry, £70 million is relatively small. So they want to have a say in mergers and acquisitions. I don't get the impression they're going to prevent them in any way.
I think they're going to encourage them. If we've got public infrastructure being sold off to the tune of hundreds of billions of pounds, UK is just being opened up for anybody who wants to come in and feed.
David.
Yeah, this is sort of going back to a bit of Harold Macmillan, isn't it? Selling off the family silver on the one hand. And then on the other hand, we've clearly got some kind of Keiretsu going on here, and there's competing factions. And whatever they're trying to do here with the instruments of government to shut out corporate interests is because on the one hand, we're going down an avenue rapidly under this PESCO where the corporate structure will be very clearly one side, and it will be one group where there'll be obviously a lot of movement, as we've already talked about, with the people that are already in that faction, you know, Lockheed, BAE, Boeing, whatever, Airbus. And then we've got the other side, haven't we? So this is what that's about. So I've got to say, you know, where's the analogy with this? Well, we had a bit of this shenanigans under Alan Clark and Matrix Churchill when Iraq was buying huge amounts of key blue heat engineering in this country and then manufacturing the supergun. So there's a bit of that, you know, there's a bit of that got on already, and of course it was the Israelis that put that to the stop because they thought, well, you're not going to be shooting that thing towards us, so you better pack it up. But our government were warned. I mean, so I see probably here what's going on is a bit of an Indian, Russian, Chinese, Iranian angle here, where there are some other players that are saying, well, we'll have a piece of some of your defence defence industry and some of the decent stuff, and they're trying to lock them out. That would be what that is.
Yeah. Okay, that may well be correct, absolutely correct. So, just briefly, a little bit of financial news. Now, of course, since 2008, these first couple of slides go back a few years. Since 2007-2008 financial crash, there's been a steady stream of articles like these and speeches by Bank of England personnel about too big to fail and how it has to be ended. What we've been told that too big to fail is too dangerous, it has to be stopped. Well, of course, nothing has been done about it, and that's once again being highlighted this time by Donald Trump's chief economic advisor, Gary Cohn, who was speaking to the Financial Times and said the post-crisis regulatory system is fostering increasing complexity and growth of massive financial firms, ignoring the lessons of the meltdown. He said that the various legislation in Britain and the United States, which was supposed to remove the too big to fail threat, in fact is leading to the consolidation of more activity in a handful of vast companies. He said that clearing houses that are supposed to reduce the risk involved in trillions, hundreds of trillions of unregulated derivatives contracts were becoming concentrations of systemic risk, is how he described it. And he said that this is creating what he described as perverse effects, including the inability of new banks to enter the system. So, of course, as usual, no mention of Glass-Steagall or splitting up the banks properly. The Bank of England recently telling us, don't worry, we're all safe because we've got the ring fence in Britain that came in since 2007, 2008. And don't worry because banks' capital controls or the capital levels that they're supposed to hold now are sufficient, whereas others with a more sensible outlook, like the Adam Smith Institute, saying that the Bank of England is talking a load of nonsense. So we've got another voice added here. Perhaps this will be dismissed because he's working for Donald Trump, but that would be a silly thing to do.
Yeah, money, love of money.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Well, if we're talking big banks, big money, we need to be back on the subject of child abuse. And last week I was following up on who had said what about the work of Chief Constable Mike Veal, Wiltshire Police, the man who steadfastly continued with his investigation into former Prime Minister Ted Heath, despite the fact that he was put under enormous pressure by a great many people, lords, MPs and officials of the British state, who all tried to close him down and stop him doing what he was doing. Well, we decided we'd speak to the National Police Chiefs Council to see what they had to say. I wasn't able to report this email last week because I only saw it after we'd done the particular news section on this, but we did get a reply. I've blown it up a bit here against the backdrop of Sarah Thornton, the chair of the National Police Chiefs Council, and they had this to say. First of all, we have not made comment on the specific investigation, but we can share our position on investigating dead people. While there can be no criminal justice outcome to allegations made against the dead, a proportionate investigation is necessary to establish the facts of the case. Identity, and bring to justice any living offenders and prevent any further harm. But of course, it wasn't just any dead person, Mike, was it? This was a man who had been the Prime Minister of Britain, a man, therefore, with access and immense power over all areas of society. But the National Police Chiefs Council don't think that that's worthy of commenting on. And also, despite a Chief of Police, Mike Veal, being threatened and warned off by the very government and political party that Ted Heath had been part of, they don't think it's worthy to comment on that either.
No.
And I'm fascinating, of course, that although I can't say these were the words of Sarah Thornton, she is chair, so she's in the senior post. Remarkable that this was the chief constable that, of course, failed to take action when the Muslim gentleman identified child abuse at Oxford and Cherwell Valley College when she was chief constable of Thames Valley Police. So no support for this man's work whatsoever. and we had to prompt a statement from them. There has been no statement from the Conservative Party, no statement from Theresa May's office, no statement from the Home Office. I think the agenda is bury it as fast as possible. Yeah. David, just 30 seconds and we'll bring in the closed slide for a bit of discussion.
Well, this is I don't know whether to congratulate Mike Veal or commiserate him, because how does any, this is probably what the guy has set out to do, how does any chief constable go about investigating serious problems with a head of a party or somebody in high office like that that's in power? So you've effectively got the state, a division of the state, i.e. a chief constable, an officer, investigating what high office officers are doing. And how does that happen then? Because this is a vital thing that Mike Veal has done here. And rather than the tack being as it is, where it's all sort of pretty much one-sided, my take on this is make the guy a sir and make him up to order of the Garter. Because this is the kind of guy you need around, because he's asking the right questions. How do I go about this? What about if we happen it again? And you beg the question, what's next? What about if we have something even more serious that's put on the table? How does it get redress? So, I've got to say, all credit to Wilts Police. Absolutely. I don't have a problem with what they've done at all.
And I'll just remind people that, of course, Sarah Thornton is a common purpose trained future leader. So she's fully involved with that organisation, as was the former head of Oxford and Cherwell Valley College, Sally Dicketts. So what those ladies discussed behind closed doors, did they discuss the abuse case while it was in progress? We have no way of knowing, because of course the nature of common purpose is to use its networks behind closed doors. Well, I'm going to end by bringing in Nigel Farage, and I know that whenever I speak about this man, I invariably ruffle some feathers, and I'm very happy to ruffle some feathers today. This is, in fact, a story from back in March, and it was Nigel Farage announcing that he'd set up a new group. So here we are, EFD Group becomes EFDD. So the Europe of Freedom and Direct Democracy reflects a shared wish. There's something in the translation here, this is not my grammar, among all members for the citizens of Europe to have more of a say, and that any further moves towards the centralisation of powers should only be legitimised by free and fair referenda. So correct me if I've got it wrong, Mike, but it seems to me that here is Nigel Farage saying, well, we can have more centralisation of European powers, providing they do it by free and fair referenda.
The European Union has a reputation for free and fair referenda, Brian.
Okay.
Not.
Thank you. So why have I brought Nigel Farage on screen? Because, of course, at the moment, UK column warning what's happening to the British military and the creation of the EU military, unified military structure, complete with its treasury. Utter silence from this man. And of course, this is one of the most dangerous positions we've been in. 70 million people voted to come out of the EU. Has Nigel Farage stood up and warned them about what's happening with the military? No, he has not. And David, I believe you have exchanged some communication with James Carver, MEP, UKIP MEP, on the subject of
Yeah.
what?
Well, I put the PESCO stuff to him, and it was, it's okay. I'm getting all this because I'm on the relevant committee. But this is exactly the same as all the other UKIP people that we've gone to try to get them to speak out about this. And I've got to say, I've got to come back to it. When I met Farage face to face at Kettering at the launch of Better Off Out or whatever we were doing there, I said, bearing in mind, I was asked for an opinion from a Knight of the Garter as to what Farage's opinion was on military union. This is why I went to him face to face, because this guy wanted to know what Farage was going to do and say. I said, right, need to talk to you about military union. And he ran off instantly, as did Roger Helmer. Exit that away, pronto. did not want to talk about it at all. And of course, he sold everyone a real pup, with this EU army. It's not an EU army, it's our army. That's the whole point. It's our army. It's not an EU army. It's ours going into union. It's not the same thing.
Right.
Everybody when you box pop people with this, they go, well, we're leaving. It's nothing to do with us. No, it's everything to do with us.
David, you're smiling, and yes, what can we say to get some of this through to people? Not only has Nigel Farage not warned the 17 million voters about this, of course, I've had a little look on James Carver's MEP's Twitter page shortly before the news. What does he think the most serious issues are? Not EU, a unified EU military structure. He's worried about the runway in St Helena. He's worried about white poppies and CCTV on ferries. So we are pointing a finger at Nigel Farage, the man who said it's all over, we're coming out of Europe. What has he done? He has led 17 million people into a cul-de-sac. And I think that's the danger. David, we're going to say thank you very much for joining us today. We're going to stay on the track of what's happening here. Perhaps we'll see organisations like Veterans for Britain speaking out. I'm still waiting. But unless we alert the population to what's happening with the military, of course, we cease to exist as a country. And this is all based on the lies, because that is the correct word, the lies of British Prime Minister Theresa May, a woman who won't speak out on the abuse of children, or the fact that the evidence points towards the fact that we've had a British Prime Minister, Edward Heath, who was an abuser of children. What a state of affairs, Mike. We'll end on that note. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow. Bye-bye.